Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Hello.
Good morning, too.
Yes, you're all most welcome to this introduction session for strategy, governance, and leadership. That's paper 14. My name is Julius Mukobe. And I hope you can all see my screen. Hello, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, my phone and email are displayed there. And I'd like us to jump into the session. Paper 14, I'd like to start with the objectives of the paper. And I'd like to appreciate everybody that attempted the question paper last sitting, and even for those that are getting on for the very first time. Paper 14 is about strategy, governance, and leadership. Many students believe it's what they call a theoretical paper. I wouldn't want to call it a theoretical paper. It's a paper that's it's a living paper. It resonates so much with what we do at our workplaces. One of the objectives of this paper is broadly to allow learners' ability, is to assess learners' ability to apply the knowledge that has been studied in the course of the semester. And these are largely in areas of reporting on aspects to do with strategic management, marketing, human resources, organizational management, organizational development and change, management information systems, entrepreneurship, among others. So the course of this study will look at different modules that will cover these aspects and others that I've not displayed here. For example, aspects of leadership, aspects of governance. All these will be part of aspects that will be covered in the paper. The scope of the paper, in other words, what is that we expected to cover? One, there'll be aspects of strategies that are or that can be adopted by business organizations. We'll be looking at aspects of how to evaluate marketing mix, human resource functions, aspects of management accounting. This is not so much a big thing. And then also contemporary management issues. So these are some of the aspects that we'll be able to cover. One thing that I'd like to also point out at this point is that the paper largely looks at aspects we want to adopt in our businesses and organizations that have a long-term perspective. If I may give an example, the paper is not concerned about how to recruit an assistant accountant or a technician. The paper looks at those aspects that you need to think through that will have a long-term perspective. If we want to shift our organization from location A to location B, that requires so many things that we need to think through. So those are things that are going to be featuring largely in this paper. Let me also step back and look at the examination structure. Then we can get into other details. It is a 3-hour paper and just 2 sections. Section 1 is a compulsory number carrying 50 marks. Section 2 has 3 questions, each carrying 25 marks. The candidate is required to attempt 3 questions, including question 1, which is a compulsory question. And then you have the option of picking 2 other questions from section B. Section 1 is normally some narrative, and the examiner will give you a narrative, could be 2 pages, 3 pages, whatever it opts to do, and expects you to understand that passage and then answer questions that follow. So in the course of our discussions, we'll need to understand the content of the syllabus, but also most importantly, we need to understand how we should write our answers in the examination. At this level, it's not about replicating what you've studied in class. It's about understanding the concept, knowing when to apply them, how to apply them, and where. At this level, I'll take you as somebody who is going to play an advisory role to an average business entity. So we must be able to know how do we bring down this concept that we've studied in class and bring it to a level that this business person will understand, comprehend, and be able to take a decision that will influence their next chapter of their business cycle. How I communicate to somebody who is in big time investments may be different from how I communicate to somebody doing basic business, a shop, grocery, supermarket. So different types of entities in the business line would need specific level of comprehension and also how to communicate to them. If I'm going to communicate to a humanitarian organization, an NGO, I could still pick the same principle and then relate it to what this organization does. So in our examinations, the examiner, first of all, his expectations would include 1, the ability of a learner to apply the principles that have been learned. 2, ability to communicate that subject matter to the concerned parties. How I communicate certain concept to a bank manager of a corporate bank may not be the same way I'll communicate to somebody running a restaurant. Concept's the same, but the parties at the level of their business practice is different, but I should be able to bring this to them. And they should be able to understand what I'm communicating and therefore be able to take a decision that needs to be taken. The examiner also expects us or is assessing our advisory ability based on whatever scenario that has been set in the examination. If you look at these expectations, the examiner is not expecting us to simply reproduce a concept. We'll be seeing different models as we study, So it's not that the examiner wants us to reproduce that model and just put it on paper. The examiner wants to be sure we understood the model. What aspect of the model are we communicating? So what we're communicating must relate to the challenge or the issue that has been set in the paper, and is also expecting to hear from us how would we advise the parties concerned based on that aspect. For some of you, it may be the first time you're sitting for the paper, but I'll just give a quick example. If the examiner is asking us why businesses fail, for example, how I communicate that to a corporate entity will be different from how I'll use the same concept to display it to an ordinary first-time business player. So the examiner wants to see us pick up this content, apply it to the situation that he has set, and also he was waiting to see how we use our content to advise. So our understanding is important, our mode of communication is critical, and what is our resultant advisory perspective that we're going to write on that page. At this point, it's about communication, it's about informing, it's about enabling somebody to take critical decision based on our analysis. So what I'm saying is it's not enough to cram concept. It's not enough for you to say, I've crammed this formula and I'm throwing it into the examiner's space. If, for example, the question has something to do with assessing the net present value of your projections, how do I communicate this to a very educated person? How do I communicate this to somebody who has no basic business knowledge or accounting knowledge, but is running a business as a manager? Okay, what does net present value mean? How does a person who is running a bank or a financial entity understand it too? How about a person that is simply putting up a factory or a hotel, a school? What is the NPV implied to their business? So in the exam, we must be flexible and be able to bring out what this concept is and how it will be understood by our client. Let me assume the examiner is the client. So it's not just enough for us to replicate and just say NPV is positive, therefore go ahead. What is a positive NPV? How does a person who has 10 billion appreciate a positive NPV? How does a person who has 200,000 appreciate a positive NPV? So in terms of how we structure exam answers, our ability to apply the principle is important, how we communicate, and the resultant advisory aspects is very critical. And that's what the examiner looks out for in an exam. It's not about your content. You may have a lot of content, but you're not able to apply it well. Are we together? So far, any questions? Before we jump into the other aspects, I just want to be sure we're following each other and I'm not leaving anybody behind. Can I continue? Are we together? Hello?
Yes, we are.
Today is a Sunday, so I'm assuming I'm in a church. I want to hear some amen from you people.
Amen.
Right. So next, what are the learning outcomes? I'll briefly talk about this. But also before I even talk about the learning outcomes, I'd urge everybody to get a copy of the syllabus. because the syllabus will guide us to appreciate and know what modules we are covering, what topics we're covering. In many of my sessions, there are some topics I don't cover because I know you've covered these at your lower sessions, and I don't want to spend time repeat that. So we'll need to look at the syllabus and we'll need to agree what topics have been covered. For instance, the topic on financial analysis, ratio analysis, I don't normally cover that. I imagine by the time you get to this level, you've gone through financial analysis, ratio analysis, whatever it is. So what I do at this level, I just bring out aspects that relate to policy, which are largely how do we communicate these ratios. If we form these ratios in a paper, how do we look at them and how do we communicate them? So at this stage, there are things that we don't go through. We don't go into the computations on current ratio, asset ratio, no. Issues like balance scorecard, I only go through it, bring out the aspects that relate to strategy and policy. So I'd urge everybody to have the syllabus and we'll agree what we'll take on, what we can leave, and what we can defer until when it's time for revisions. Learning outcomes, one, to assess strategies adopted by an organization. Organizations will have different strategies in terms of how they're running their work. And when we talk of organizations, we're not restricting ourselves to profit making. We're also looking at other non-profit making entities. We're looking at humanitarian organizations. Okay, so we need to appreciate what are some of the strategies that each of these agencies adopt and appreciate how and why. We need to evaluate the marketing mix. Again, the word marketing mix, one would quickly think of a business entity, but even non-business entities, even humanitarian organizations will have what I would call in quotes some aspect of marketing strategy. Of course, for them, it's not really about marketing per se in terms of how to generate profits, but it's also marketing in a way that they want to spread out their roles, their functions, their services, and they want to attract beneficiaries or users of those services. Of course, we'll have a lot to do with the human resource management. We'll need to assess how we report on strategic options that are available for organizations, the strategic management practices. We'll need to see how the contemporary management issues are being viewed or applied by different agencies and why. At this level, we expected we should be able to support development of strategic plans for organizations. So we'll have a session on that. Many of you at this level in your organizations are probably called into meetings that you're going to help support the development of business plans, strategic plans. So we'll need to be able to appreciate that we're able to do this or support that. We need to be able to evaluate development processes of organizations. We need to be able to appreciate how to evaluate challenges that entities face. And we should be able to know what is it that's a challenge. So we should be able to distinguish between a symptom of a challenge and the challenge. And we need to get down to look at the grassroots, the root cause of whatever we think is a challenge. If clients are complaining, we deliver late. Is that a thing or that's a symptom of some deficiency in our system? Delivering late could be maybe the trucks don't arrive in time. Maybe our processes are slow, so we don't have everything in time. Or maybe it's just something else. So late deliveries could actually be a symptom. So we should not simply address the late delivery at that point, but we may need to go back and look at our entire supply chain and see where that lateness is coming from. Of course, we need to evaluate opportunities that businesses have. And of recent, the information technology is very critical. AI, digital platforms, etc., etc. How do we take advantage of that to enhance our business processes? So it's expected by the time we finish the session, a student is able to comprehend these 12 aspects and many more. I'm pulling out one aspect of what the paper will be about. And we tend to summarize our entire policy along these 4-5 sectors, our strategic management process. But in reality, it's much more bigger than this. What I've done is to simply compress the different aspects into compartments to allow students quickly appreciate where they're heading to. But it's actually a big thing that we need to look through. When we talk about strategic management process, it's simply a process that an entity goes through when they need to take on long-term decisions, when they need to have a change of the business direction. Like I gave an example earlier, you don't need a board to sit to have discussions on how to recruit a gate man, on how to arrange the furniture in an office. But you need the board to sit if they're going to take on a major business decision. Decisions that have to do with relocation from one geographical region to the other. What are some of the considerations we would have to take in place, to take into account if we would like to relocate MAT Abacus from Kampala to anywhere? Karamoja, Mbale, Potpoto, Mbarara. It's not something to wake up and say we're moving. You need to wade through so many aspects. So that when you're talking about your strategic management process, you're now looking at all those things you need to go through if you ever think it's necessary to relocate MAT Abacus from Kampala to elsewhere. If MAT Abacus want to relocate learning rooms and say we're getting all the computers to the top floor, we're getting all the whatever, that doesn't need a whole thing, it's just some small administrative issue. That will not be part of our strategic management aspects. So we'll need to appreciate what is a strategic process and what's an operation. And our strategic management process will go through issues like having a strategic analysis. Strategic analysis has to do with understanding your environment, understanding where you are. We'll look at that in details as we go along. After we've understood what we are, both in terms of our external environment and internal environment. If we've understood that, then we're able to know whether we have what it takes to move to the next level. If we don't understand what we are, then it's even difficult to even know whether we need to move. Once we've done the strategic analysis so well, of course, in the course of the study, we'll look at the different models that we need under strategic analysis alone. Well, strategic analysis is simply getting to understand, doing an analysis of what you as an entity is, both in terms of what you own and also in terms of what you don't own but influences your business practices. We'll need to ask ourselves what strategic options or choices we have. Again, we'll have a set of models that we'll need to use for us to understand how to look at different options. We'll need to understand how we need to choose what option is better. So look at things to do with our strategic evaluations. And once we've evaluated our strategies, we've picked on the option that we think is most suitable, then we think of implementation. After implementation, we'll keep reviewing and monitoring how far we're going. Now, this is a very simplistic appreciation of a lot of what we're going to do in our sessions. But what is important is under each of these boxes, there's a load of so many other modules that are within. Again, I should warn students should not think a module only applies for strategic option. This module applies to implementation. It's all very flexible. We're looking at business dynamics. We're looking at an environment that is changing every other day. So we, as learners, we must also be able to adapt and understand how I can use a model or a concept that was taught under strategic analysis, but now we are in implementation. It's a very fluid thing, okay? But this broadly gives us a sense of some of the core things we'll have to discuss. But under each of these, there are loads of different modules: human resources, technology, operations management, marketing aspects. So they're all embedded in each of these. But this just gives us a quick high-level aspect of what the strategic management process is all about. So these are just some bit of highlights that probably students will come across as we study. By the time you do your management process, you also need to first of all identify what your entity strategy is. You need to identify how different processes can be interplayed in order to make choices. The other thing that's also important for us to know that when you talk of a management process, it's continuous. So in other words, you may not think I'm now doing stage 1, then I'm doing stage 2. It's continuous. While you're still having a very good analysis, something in the environment changes drastically that you need to take a quick decision to jump into something else. So it's a continuous process. And you almost have a department that is continuously assessing the environment. You have a department, or you have, it may not even be a department, but you have managers who are continuously reviewing different options. So it's not something that it's in kind of in silos. You have somebody doing analysis, somebody doing options, somebody implementing. It's all around, and everybody is almost playing their part. But for purposes of our studies, we tend to make silos of all this, but in real life, it's continuous. So we'll look at that, the process. We'll look at the different aspects of our management processes, the nature of strategies, the importance of strategic management process, the strategic planning frameworks. So all these are some of the things that we will cover in the course of our study. We'll need to have a good understanding of what we call the operating environment. Again, to me, this is one of the foundational aspects that we must appreciate, that a process or an entity will majorly have two environments. Your internal environment, that means the environment that you own, the environment that you have control over. Let me give an example. If you're in a home, your home is your internal environment. You have the ability to change the look of the sitting room. You can choose to make the bedroom 1, the children's bedroom, bedroom 2, the guest bedroom. Tomorrow you can change your mind and you swap. Things that you own and things that you have control over become your internal environment. Then you have the external environment. Again, if I talk about home, you have the external environment, which is made up of two aspects: the micro external and the macro external. The micro external could be like your neighbors. The things that your neighbors will influence how you operate. If your neighbor wakes up one day and they have a party and there's loud music, they may affect your sleep. Okay? If your neighbor has dogs that keep backing up and down, they'll affect your sleep. You don't have lots of control over what's happening there, but it affects you, and you can afford to go and tell the neighbor, can you please lower down your music? That's micro-external. In a business perspective, this would be aspects that belong to an industry. If I'm an organization, let me say Julius organization, I deal in stationery, everything with the organization is my internal environment. But there are those other things that pertain to every other business that is in stationery related aspects. Those would be micro-external. They relate to the industry. And then macro-external are those aspects that affect everybody respective. So if, again, I take the example of your home, there are those things that will affect everybody respective. In Kampala, we can talk of the potholes. It doesn't matter whether your house is a 10-star residency. If the potholes to your way home, you have to bear the discomfort of the potholes. You can have the comfort of your home, but the potholes, you may not even have a lot of control. So as we study this paper, we must always ask ourselves, where are we in this environment? That's one. Two, we must then start asking ourselves, what is it that we want to do? So whatever you want to do, or whatever you've done, is in a way influenced by one of these three environments. You won't jump over and move to the next stage. You must always have an alignment of how you take advantage of what is in this environment, or how you want to minimize the challenges in those environments. Okay? If we look at our average business players in Kampala, or wherever you are, the owner of the shop, that's your internal environment. You can choose to switch off the power and say, we won't have power today. The street where you operate may be like your micro-environment, because there are things that belong to that street that impact on your business. If the street has an overflowing sewage pipe, you don't sit in your building and you say, it's my business. That mwala affects you. Macro environment is everything that affects everybody there. If there's a government pronouncement that we won't allow Kavera business, it affects everybody across. So we'll be looking at many of these aspects, and we'll be asking ourselves, what strategy do we need to apply if we're going to advise against owners? What do we need to do when faced with certain challenges, etc., etc. And of course, we'll also need to keep asking ourselves, when we do our management process, what are some of the key decision areas that are affected? Of course, our products or services get affected or get impacted on. Our markets, because if we're in businesses, we need to sell our products into a market. Locations, are we in the best location? Structures, we have an appropriate management structure so as to run this business. The structure one has when they're starting their business, it's a one-man business, Kamnako and Sons. The structure that used to operate Kamnako and Sons will be different from when you are now operating something group of companies. The human resources that you need will be different. Aspects of human resources are even very interesting, because human resources are not just the people working, but human resources also include the quality of the people, the quantity in terms of numbers. Do you have the appropriate number? Do you have the right quality? Do you have the right skill mix? But most important, Do you have the team that you can project and say, this is a team that's taking us to the year 2030? Because as a business, I'm growing and I have a going concern perspective. So I should be able to live through the challenges of 2030. I should be able to live through the challenges of 2040 if I'm going to grow into this big, massive business entity. So in 2026, do I have the right caliber of human resources that are able to contend with the challenges of 2030? So when we talk about our human resources, not just for your employee today, but we must also keep projecting, do I have the right caliber of staff that are going to live into this digital era? Will they be able to manage the challenges? Will they be able to come up with new work ethics and practices that will make us top of the game 10 years from now? In that case, it's not just about who I recruit now, it's about why do I recruit this person? What are the potentials of this person? Can they grow with us, or are they here just to pass time? Some of you miss interviews because they ask you, what is that to bring on paper? And you say, I'll take instructions and work hard. But the man is asking, what value are you going to add to my organization? And the answers you give don't give the people on the panel that you actually have the ability to look ahead. So this guy just say, well, this one is not the right candidate. Part of our strategic management process, we also look at technology and the process systems. We have what it takes to compete. We have what it takes to expand and grow. So our business governance, strategy, and leadership is largely about these, and of course, many others. Any questions? Any questions? The other thing that I want to bring to the attention of the learners, the paper looks largely theoretical, like you keep calling it. Many of the learners, by the time they get this paper, they've gone through those computational papers. They've been doing analysis, they've been doing tax, they've been doing costing and all that. So when they get to this level, they think it's lowery, as you said. And one of the challenges or mistakes that we do is to say, this one I'll read. After all, they are not formulas. Come to 3 weeks before the exam, students call you and say, I don't have notes on this module. I don't have notes on this chapter. Students ask, sir, did we cover this? And by the time they start reading, everything looks too overwhelming. And this partly accounts for the recent results we see in terms of performance. Some 4 or 5 years ago, the average performance pass rate was 70, 65. Of recent, it's dropping to 50. The last sitting, but one was 44. This time we had a pass rate of 29. And when you interact with the learners, one of the things the kids say is, I understand the concept in class, but I failed to apply it in the exam. And in my assessment, one of the reasons they fail to apply it in the exam is, first of all, they take this content and look at it only as an academic content. They don't try to infer it into their workplace environments. I find it strange when students fail topics in human resource management. A question asks, how do you recruit staff? And students can't demonstrate how to recruit staff. yet all of them have gone through a recruitment process. Even if you jump through the window and you land into the organization, at least you can see how other people get recruited. So why would one fail a number on human resources? So students don't read the paper. Student thinks because it's a theoretical paper, they'll read it for 2 days and then answer questions. That's why people say, I understand the module, but I didn't see it in the paper. Because in the paper, the examiner is bringing out a real life thing. The examiner will write about conflict in the work environment, but they will not tell you there's conflict. So you need to look at that paper and appreciate what is it that's taking place here. Is it conflict? Is it workplace politics? So you should be able to distinguish between a workplace politics and maybe a conflict between managers or between supervisors and subordinates, and therefore be able to answer the question. 2, students, when there is a computational number, their mind is locked up into the complicated computations that you study in other modules. I gave an example of NPV. If I need to demonstrate NPV to my grandmother, I don't need to start telling her about the net cash flows and all that. All I need to do is, in simple terms, tell her that I'm doing this computation to see if at the end of 5 years, you still have value. So anything that's positive, it means I still have value and benefits. If it's negative, it means I would have lost money. Simple. Don't start disturbing your grandmother when you see this the cost of capital, this the cash flows, you see I've got liable taxes, inventory money. Her question is, will I still have value? So find a way of learning how to bring these concepts down to a level that you're interfacing with the other party. If I'm in a banker, yes, I can start telling them about cost of capital, about inflation rates, about hedging, because that's the language they understand. But if I've met a rich man who didn't go to school but is owning a powerful business, I'll need to find a way of illustrating what hedging is so that he appreciates it. So students must understand the concept and they should be able to know how to translate it and communicate it. For you to do that, you must start understanding the papers, reading the paper from day one. Don't pile notes and then when you wake up, you start photocopying the same notes, and then at the end of the day, you find you photocopied one session 3 times and the session don't have at all. So I would encourage students, let's start from day one. Let's get in. Let's appreciate what is that is being taught. How far can I go with this paper? When should I do this? When should I do that? We've started having mock sessions. The last sitting in a class of about 30, only 3 people attempted the mock. When I inquired from the students, many said I wasn't prepared. Others said I was busy at my place of work. Others just said they actually kept quiet. But me keeping quiet is one way of communicating. The mock is good because it gives you that aspects of appreciating, have I understood what I've been taught? Can I ably answer a question? When you dodge a mock paper, you're doing yourself a big disservice because there are few moments that students should be very keen to subject themselves to this examination environment and write out an answer. So let's do all the mocks that are in. Many times I give some questions to students Again, the response rate is very low, less than 1%. Again, let's get time. Look at the questions. Try to answer. Students have a habit of picking notes. The handbooks are good, yes, but we also need to get to understand, we also need to hear the other version of a scenario. So students get handbooks. Students pick my notes of 2019 and they say, I have this whole module. My notes change every now and then. The notes may not change, but my explanations do change because many times I'm relating it with what's happening now. If somebody picked up the handbook of 2020, that handbook had no effects of COVID. So you won't even appreciate what was COVID in terms of our business perspective. The handbook of 2023 does not even tell you about the Ukraine-Russian conflict, how it affected our business environment. But if you came to class, we'll look at all these different scenarios. How did the Russian-Ukraine aspect affect business in Uganda, thousands of miles away? Was this an external perspective? What was it like? So that when we talk about external environment, our brain should actually broaden the things that happen in the Russia-Ukraine issues that affect our local business person here on the street. So there are a lot of illustrations that we do in class that I would encourage people to find time and get to class. Reading that handbook alone is not enough, in my view. It's not enough because we're dealing with business in its normal changing environment. Okay? So I'd encourage students to get to class. I'd encourage students to get to know each other. Because at times, when you don't have notes and you can't reach me or you can't reach the administration, your fellow learners will be able to respond to that. And above all, take time to read beyond the notes that I give. The notes that I give are simply pointers, but we have a lot of reading materials. So read beyond what I give. That way you'll be able to have a very good grasp of the paper and therefore be able to answer the questions ably. I've spoken for the last 15 minutes. So I'd like to open up the floor to you people to let me know what are your expectations, what are the things that you want to see us do, and how do you want to see an improvement in how we deliver the paper. Over to you. So should I say the floor or the platform is now open to you? I need to hear something from you. Okay. Any comments, responses, contributions, criticisms? Hello? Since you're not speaking, I'll choose. Samuel?
Yes, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
For now, I have nothing to say. I've been attending what you were saying.
Yes.
And I liked it.
Who is this? Oh, Samuel Agwang, right. There's another Samuel Mwaka. And what's interesting, when students are on a platform, at times I'm not so sure if they're there or they've simply logged on and they've walked away. Conrad? Praise? Are you guys there?
No comment. No comment.
What's no comment?
I have listened. I have no comment. Yes.
Immaculate? At least I want to hear everybody's voice this remaining 8 minutes.
Hello, sir.
Yes?
This is Elvis. I'm inquiring if getting the iSpal book can add value on top of getting the handouts to give out. Is it really necessary? The ICPA book.
The book is okay, but my advice is get time and get into class. The book was written in 2013. We are now 2026. We are yet to see the effects of the Trump's invasion of Venezuela. How does it impact our businesses now? You won't find that in the book. But if you came to class, we will quietly say, oh yes, now we see what happened when Trump invades one of the largest oil producers. So the book is okay, but we also need to keep getting to class so that we see the day-to-day aspects of the perspectives that are in the book. I commented on, there's a student who had all my notes and they still failed, and I said, you see, having my notes is not enough. Getting to class, having group discussions with people is important. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Next. Isabella. Andrew.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Comment, your contribution.
I think I'll just focus on the notes that you're providing and attending classes as well.
Right. For those that have attempted the paper, what was your challenge? Because I don't want to assume everybody here is doing it for the first time. And please don't be shy. I've always told students, if you search for CPA and passed all through, it will be very strange. Failing is normal. Rebounding is normal. Failure does not mean total loss. It actually means there's some aspect that you probably didn't understand well. So when you get to class again, it helps you understand better. So even for those that are doing the paper for the second time, third time, fourth time, don't be afraid. In fact, those who are doing it more than once or twice, find time, let's sit. Call me, we'll come sit and try to see what were the challenges that you guys had. At this time, at this level, failing is something very normal and noble. So don't get embarrassed, don't get shy. These are things that we all go through. Okay.
Yes, that one now brings me to the question I was going to ask.
Yes.
Among the question in section B, the 3 questions that we are supposed to attempt to, what would be the best approach, including taking into consideration sections here as a compulsory of 50 marks?
What would be the come again? What would be the consideration for?
What would be the best approach to at least get the 50 marks from both sections A and B, taking into considerations we have to answer question 2 from section B, which carries 25 marks each, and section A as a compulsory question of 50 marks.
Right. Let me say this even before I answer your question. Wherever you have a compulsory question, you must attempt. The beauty with policy is the compulsory question is 50 marks, so there's no way you'll run away from it. But those other levels where you have a compulsory questions of 30 marks, even if you got 60 out of the others and you didn't attempt a compulsory question, you would have failed. So first and foremost, you must attempt a compulsory question. I always tell students, read the required first. The required gives you a quick understanding of do I have enough material for this question, for that question, for that question. And I always tell students, go for the hanging fruits, low hanging fruits, or go for that topic that you know best. If you find yourself, you know question 3, one of the 2 options, you know it so well, answer that question so well. Because normally when you have enough material for an answer, you'll spend less time. If the question is for 3 marks, don't write 2 pages for 3 marks. You must also now start saying, how do I balance my content with time? Because the examination is also looking at time management. It's not written somewhere, but impliedly for you as a candidate, time management is part of how you're going to earn marks. If the question requires 3 marks, don't write 3 pages. You'll get 3 marks, but you'd have spent 20 minutes for it. So look at the question and ask yourself, which are the questions that I can do quickly and finish? A paper is 3 hours, that's about 180 minutes. You have 100 marks that you're supposed to choose your best 50 or best 90. So in other words, for question 1, don't spend more than 1.5 hours on it. It's 50 marks, therefore, give it half of the time. The other 2 questions, don't spend more than 40 minutes on each. So if I have good information in question under section B, and I can read them very well, maybe I need an hour. Then I need to go to question 1. Question 1, you have this long passage that you need to read. Get a pencil, and as you keep reading it, after all, you'd have read the required. So as you keep reading it, underline where all issues that relate to the question are. So that by the time you get to the end, you don't have to go and read. You just say, oh, they talked about internal environment here. I can see aspects of internal environment. Underline and put maybe IE, internal environment. Somewhere they're talking about human resources. Underline, then say they're looking about evaluation of human resource. So that by the time you finish reading this paper, you've identified where all these pointers are. Because depending on your reading speed and how you understand, some people could even take 30 minutes just reading that long passage. They finish, they got the question paper, then they need to go back and read. So if you're not careful, you'd have spent 1.5 hours reading without even answering the question. So get a pencil. As you keep reading, underline some of those important aspects. When you come back to the question and they're asking you about the SWOT, you'd have underlined where all the strengths were, where all the weaknesses were, where all opportunities were, and where the threats were. So how you read and how you organize your question is very important. 2, for any question, the examiner wants you to pinpoint the aspects of the question in the passage. If the examiner wants you to write about, let's say you're doing external environment, aspects of internal environment may be political, economic, social, whatever it is. If the examiner asks you to look at the external environment aspects, don't simply say, I'll write about political, economic, social, technological, legal. No. Go and say the legal issue in the narrative relates to the court pending issues that the client has to deal with. Pick it from there. Don't pick it because you know it in your brains. The examiner wants you to pick it from the passage. In other words, the question may only want you to pick out, the question paper may have displayed only two aspects, legal and technological. So don't start writing political for the examiner. The examiner will know you've just crammed the model. The examiner wants you to pick out aspects of that model from the examination paper. If the examination paper does not talk about a political conflict, don't tell the examiner about political issues. And that's one aspect of how to apply the principle learned. Don't cram it and reproduce it for the guy. Tell him, I can see a political issue in paragraph 1 and it's A, B, C, D. I then see a legal issue which talks about a court case. I then see an economic issue which talks about economic parameters that have been announced by the Ministry of Finance or the Bank of Ghana. So you could find that question has only been able to pick out 3 aspects. So that's the other thing about examination approach. Students spend a lot of time reading the passage, then they get somewhere, they've forgotten what they read, they go back, and before they know it, they've spent 40 minutes. Of recent, the examiner has a short passage, and then he has appendices at the back. Now, the appendices are part of what you're reading. Someone they'll say the aspects of this are in appendix on page 4. Go to page 4 and see what it is. So you must be able to train yourself to read questions very well. Read and understand the questions. We'll deal with that when we start our revision sessions during the class. We won't wait until the end of the session. We'll keep having question approach as we go along. Any other concern? Anything else? We seem to be running out of time. We've actually overshot our time. If there are no further questions, if there are no other inputs, I'd like to appreciate you all for sparing time to join in this webinar session. I'm looking forward to meeting all of you, not just e-meeting, but also meeting physically. We'll try to identify what are some of the common challenges. And to the extent possible, we'll also look at the individual challenges of how we can be able to address them and be able to have our examination papers written well. It's not a difficult paper, but it's a paper that you need to understand and relate the concepts to our daily life. There are no abstracts in this paper. It's a real life. If you read many of the questions that the examiner sets, if you look at it carefully, it's actually writing about a scenario that has happened in Uganda. I've never read a scenario of a paper that has a scenario of London, Kenya, whatever. They're all Ugandan-based scenarios. In fact, if you look at the paper, you can actually see he has only changed the name from Mukasa to Julius, but you can actually see it's Mukasa Enterprise is writing about. So it's a real life. It relates to our day-to-day business perspectives in Uganda. And the examiner is actually asking you, can you advise Mukasa Enterprise on how to deal with A, B, C, D? So you don't have to just have the content alone, but also how to apply it to a Mukasa situation. So look at this and many more as we keep going over the different modules of the paper. With that, I'd like to end here. I'd like to encourage you guys to find time, walk into class. Yes, at times you have busy schedules, but since you've opted to come and do the course, at least every 3 weeks, find one session that you come to class. There's so much warmth in class. A lot of what I communicate, if you're in class and you're physical, you get to hear better. And it's interesting how our eyes hear. Hearing is not just by the ears only, but also our eyes can hear. So when you're in class and there's a demonstration, you get the concept better. At times I look at the faces of the people and I appreciate this one has not picked up this concept, and I repeat. When you're online, I can't see your faces, I can't hear your eyes. So once in a while, drop in class. Of course, we're taking advantage of technology now that you could study from anywhere, but it's still good to have physical fellowship and encounter with everybody. So find time, get to class. I'm sure there'll be a very big difference. One of the things I've noticed that most of the people who pass the papers, many times I realize they've attended more physical classes than online classes. So get time, get to class. With that, I'd like to end here. Want to wish you a happy new year. For those who are contesting, wish you the best. For those who are not contesting, go cast your vote. And then we'll be ready to see what the next chapter of our lives will be like. With that, I'd like to end here. And I wish you the best in this next session. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Right. See you in the next, in the first session that we'll be having.